I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Idaho student murders. 4 lives taken, a desperate search for a killer, and now the most anticipated trial on court TV. Here's the story. Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee were 4 friends living together in an off-campus house at the University of Idaho. They worked hard and were all flourishing as students and having the time of their lives. They were popular and their house was known as a gathering spot for fellow students. All of that tragically changed in the early morning hours of November 13, 2022. Those 4 students were stabbed to death inside their home. The brutal crime shook the community and touched the nation, setting off an intense manhunt for a killer. Students were afraid to be alone on campus. Some never came back. Investigators from the Moscow Police Department joined forces with the Idaho State Police and the FBI, following every lead, every tip, and every piece of evidence. That investigation took them across the country to Pennsylvania and led them to this man, a grad student at a neighboring university in Pullman, Washington. This accused mass killer has denied the allegations and claims to have an alibi. Well, now the case is getting closer to trial, and both sides are battling over the evidence the jury will see and hear. Trials are public, okay? Our courtrooms are public. I think you know that, I know that, we all know that. And during the course of a case, the litigation, the going back and forth, each side filing motions, trying to get the other side to do something, trying to exclude evidence, whatever the motion is, these things are all part of the court docket. And when you have high-profile cases or regular cases, most states around the nation do a really good job these days of putting this stuff online. Idaho is one of those states that is really good at this. They have a high-profile case. They're going to put all of the court filings and everything online. I want you to take a look at that docket right now because you're going to notice something really interesting about it as we watch it. Okay, look really closely. Order to seal, 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 order to seal. They're sealing everything. Not everything, but a lot of things. Like all of these orders to seal evidence and seal motions and seal documents. They've even closed the courtroom doors to have sealed hearings. Now, Court TV, we cover trials all around the country. Primarily murder trials. Everything is serious. Everything is high profile. Florida, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Arizona, California, all over the country. Ohio, South Carolina, Florida, and Florida again. So what is happening here? We saw all of these things are sealed, including some of the hearings in a public case in a public trial, which brings me to the first question in my investigation tonight. Why is everything sealed? Is this normal in Idaho? Is this the way justice is done in Idaho? Is it not as transparent as other states around the nation? Do the people of Idaho and the public not have access to things that are happening inside of their courtrooms? It's unusual for me. So let's get the inside scoop from 2 guys who know Idaho law very well. First, the attorney who represented Chad Daybell, John Pryor, is with us. You know him. And trial lawyer and former Idaho Attorney General, Dave Leroy, is with us. Great to see you guys. I'm glad you're here. I started covering trials in Idaho just recently, and it was, some of the other cases involving Lori Daybell. Dave, let me start with you. Is this normal? Is this usual for Idaho to seal a lot of things from the public, and including having hearings that are sealed from the public?
Well, as your setup suggested, there's nothing very normal about this particular case. And this is an extraordinary amount of sealing going on. But part of that sealing, I presume, is designed by the court and with the concurrence of the parties or the assertion of one party or another that something about this, if revealed pre-jury trial, may have the tendency to taint an objective jury. Much of that sealing, I presume, Benny, is to keep evidence away from you so that you will not be putting it on the national news as one way or another potentially influencing the case. Sealing in Idaho is done on an ad hoc basis, meaning that each party can make a particular application for a particular and specified reason, often in secret, and the judge makes a decision in their best discretion about what the answer is. But I presume that most of this sealing is designed to minimize pretrial publicity and enhance the possibility of finding swiftly and accurately an objective jury.
So, John Pryor, is this unusual in your practice to have this much stuff shielded from the public, including hearings?
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with David. In the general criminal case, general trial, it's highly unusual to have this much sealing. When you're dealing with a case that has a lot of publicity, and this Kohlberger case has a tremendous amount of publicity, and in recent years there's been another case or two that had a lot of publicity. The courts are working very hard at protecting not only witnesses but evidence from getting out that might influence people prior to they selecting the jury. And that's a lot of what's going on, is that they're doing this to make sure that both parties have a fair opportunity to get an unbiased jury who haven't been exposed to a lot of the information. And really, that's the predominant reason for it, Vinny.
So, Dave, from my perspective, been with Court TV for a long time, longer than any other person at Court TV, by the way. So, from my perspective, all we do is cover high-profile cases, whether it's a local case that's high-profile or national. Cases like O.J. Simpson, Casey Anthony, Jodi Arias. And inevitably, through the years, these cases are super high-profile. People talk about it from the moment the crime occurs, all the way through, all the litigation, and then to the trial. And what I've noticed through the years is that they always get a jury, number one. And number two, the jury bases their verdict on the evidence. Like, why don't we trust that? Why don't we trust that we have voir dire, that we have jurors who listen to the judge's instructions and base it? We've been shocked many times, whether it's guilty or not guilty, by juries based on the evidence.
Well, Vinny, remember, I've come from a world of politics where we trust but verify. And that verification is often best done up front rather than at the end of the case. It seems to me that we're in this case where we have already had a change of venue due to what the defense successfully advocated was too much pretrial publicity in a small venue like Moscow, Latah County, Idaho, in North Idaho. Now we're moved 300 miles away to the Boise media area. It's better to be safe than sorry. I understand that trying cases in the media is something that we all are allowed to do as citizens, and it's great TV, as your network has successfully projected over the years. But to the extent that we can, up front, protect a objective, unbiased jury in a very sensational case, I think it's not inappropriate to do that. The extent to which we're doing that here in Idaho is overwhelming, as you pointed out. But perhaps there's a reason for that. We simply don't know what's behind those seals. And many of those seals are in that list that you projected also were sealed and redacted. So there is likely to be some kind of public or private protection in addition to the public protection behind those particular orders that also have a redaction.
Yeah, and if it's the safety of someone, I get it. But if it's something else, now, John, let me read this, because this is from the defendant's motion, and it's the defendant's motion to unseal. The suspected killer, by and through his attorneys of record, hereby moves the Honorable Court for an order to unseal the investigative genetic genealogy referred to as Genetic Information, or IGG, suppression, briefing, and related hearing. Here, the way which the IGG material is accessed and used is a matter warranting public disclosure and should not be shielded from the public's right to know. So, in this scenario, John, it is the accused, right? The one who's always worried about, getting a fair trial, who wants something to be unsealed in public. Like, from where I'm sitting, then there should be no reason for it to be sealed, especially if the defendant himself is saying, hey, let the public see this.
Well, Vinny, in this particular case, that's a pure way of looking at that. I have a suspicion that there may be some issues with the evidence that they're trying to attack on the defense side, and there may be some things that might be either embarrassing or inappropriate, or there's been some tampering, or there's a chain of custody issue. And what the defense is probably trying to do, now I haven't looked at the pleadings and I don't have access, but when the defense tries to unseal and say, no, we need to let the entire public see what happened, that's usually a situation in which the defense is trying to gain some ground by suggesting that maybe what the law enforcement and the police did in this case may have been inappropriate in some way. And that's really a lot of what I think is going on. It's my personal opinion. I don't have access to the pleadings, but
you know why? Because they're sealed. They're sealed.
Right.
They're sealed. All right.
And you I'm not a fan of sealing things, and I agree wholeheartedly with David. If I'm understanding him correctly, and that if we're going to have a public trial, let's have a public trial, and let's have an entire public trial. But again, when there's sensitive information that's dealing with people's lives, and there's things that could be either an embarrassment or cause some anguish towards someone, or bring some attention to someone who's not a principal in this case, I understand limited use of the sealing option.
Gotcha. All right, John and Dave are both going to stick around. We're going to need your help again. But that motion mentioned this IGG. Coming up next, what is IGG?
If we have a sample and we have a buccal swab, why is all of this other material that you're asking for related to the genetic genealogy so important?
A Ponzi scheme and a deadly poisoning.
A former pharmacist already convicted in a federal fraud case
Now stands trial for the murder of her husband.
The financial crime gives rise to murder.
Did Natalie Cochran kill to cover up other crimes?
We're not here to obtain convictions. We're here to obtain the truth.
Now a jury will decide her fate, and Court TV will bring you every minute.
The Ponzi scheme murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings. Only on Court TV. Perfectly.
This original scientific sample from the surface trace DNA has been the product of multiple scientific experiments that we are entitled to have the underlying data on. And if we don't have that information, we are not going to be able to be effective attorneys for Mr. Coburn. We then were educated by Dr. Larkin, and it was helpful to really understand what is this genetic genealogy and what's going on. And one of the first questions that the court asked as we began today was, if we have a sample and we have a buccal swab, why is all of this other material that you're asking for related to the genetic genealogy so important?
So for the defense, a big issue is this genetic genealogy and how it all relates to this case. And don't forget, it all comes down to DNA. Because on the knife sheath that has been described just like this one, at the crime scene, beneath the victims, on this little snap, see, I gotta close the snap. This is where DNA was gathered that they have allegedly connected to the suspect. That's but you have to remember. Take a look at these court documents. These are now from the prosecution. And this was actually, I think, a motion for a protective order. The product of the genealogy conducted by the FBI was family tree that contained the name, birth date, and death date, if applicable, of hundreds of relatives, as well as their familial connections between each other and the suspect, the accused killer. The FBI then sent to local law enforcement, sent a tip to investigate the defendant. The IGG process pointed law enforcement toward the defendant, but it did not provide law enforcement with substantive evidence of guilt. After identification of the defendant, law enforcement recovered trash from the home of the defendant's parents, and the ISP laboratory did STR DNA analysis of items from the trash for comparison to the unknown crime scene DNA. That's what I said, from the snap of the sheath. That comparison indicated the DNA found on the trash belonged to the biological father of the individual who left the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. Okay, there's a lot there. I don't know how easy or difficult it was to follow. That's why we do the show. Brings us to our next question, because they mentioned the IGG process pointed law enforcement towards the defendant. So here's my question. What is IGG? We got to know what IGG is before we can understand how it pushed them towards the defendant. Joining me, former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. It's Chris McDonough. And top genetic genealogist who's done groundbreaking work in the field that's led to the first convictions and exonerations based on it. CeCe Moore is with us, and that's important. DNA goes both ways on this. It can exonerate you, and it can put you behind bars. All right, CeCe, let me begin with you. Simple question, or is it? What is IGG?
IGG stands for Investigative Genetic Genealogy. We sometimes hear it also referred to as Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy. And what it is taking DNA from a crime scene or an unidentified human remain sample and reverse engineering their identity from the distant relatives with whom they share DNA in the genetic genealogy databases. And so what we're generally working with are very distant relatives to these unknown suspects. So none of these tend to have close relatives. It's very rare. We're working with second, third, fourth, fifth cousins and beyond. We are looking for commonalities, overlaps, and ultimately common ancestors. So we can piece together their family tree, this unknown suspect's family tree, bit by bit, based on who they're sharing DNA with, then build forward in time and try to find candidates who descend from those common ancestors who were in the right place at the right time, the right gender, the right age range to potentially be the suspect.
Okay, so just for reviewing, you get the DNA from here, you don't know who it is. So now we go and we do this IGG. You say you're looking for ancestors. You're looking where for these ancestors?
So we have to analyze that DNA evidence from scratch because it's very different than what the crime labs do. We have to create what's called a SNP profile, which is different than the STR genetic markers that they use for evidence in court that the crime labs create. This profile will have hundreds of thousands of genetic markers of this unknown suspect across his genome, and it is then uploaded into genetic genealogy databases. However, even though over 50 million people have taken direct-to-consumer DNA tests, we are barred from using the largest databases. So we are limited to the databases that are willing to work with law enforcement. And those are the two smallest ones, GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. So that genetic profile is uploaded there and compared against a couple million people who have opted into allowing law enforcement to compare. However, there is one more database that is vulnerable to law enforcement use, although their terms of service bar it. And that is a company called MyHeritage that is based in Israel. So that one has been used in some cases. And I suspect that may be one of the things that the prosecution would rather stay private. It's been ruled to not be illegal in other cases. It is against the terms of service, though, and it might look bad to the public. So they might be wanting to unseal that to get public opinion behind them.
All right, Chris McDonough. That's it. I'm starting to really understand this, but this is important stuff. This is a way to find people that you may not otherwise be able to find.
Yeah, absolutely, Vinny. And I think what the defense is doing here is looking for that aha moment, right? I mean, if it is, let's say it is from MyHeritage database, they're looking for that impact into the public, court of public opinion to say, hey, wait a minute, the cops did something wrong here. Whereas if you do a comparison, it's no different than, pulling off a bunch of photographs and put them into a photographic lineup and showing a witness. Because at some point you have to get a warrant to substantiate and tie that suspect together to that DNA.
So Cece, the use of this genealogy of whether you're exonerating or looking for a killer on a hot case, an unsolved case like this, it's the way they describe it is pointing it in the direction. We only have like 20 seconds here, but you usually can't identify the actual person, but you find people that are somehow in their sphere.
Well, actually, pretty often we can point at one person or an immediate family, a set of siblings. It just depends how much data you have to work with. However, it is only used as a tip. It should not be used for the basis of arrest or to compel DNA, which is what the prosecution's argument is they didn't use it as evidence to arrest him or to take this to trial.
It's a piece used to get to the next stage. Okay, Cece Moore, thank you so much. Chris McDonough is going to stick around. Up next, folks, how did they identify the suspect?
Come.
I'm Vinny Politan. We continue our investigation of the Idaho student murders. It's a case that captivated the nation when there was a search for a mass killer. And now the nation is bracing for the biggest trial of 2025. Here's the story. 4 students were brutally murdered in their home near the University of Idaho. Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana were great people with amazing futures that were taken away by a monster. The man accused of this horrific crime has denied doing it and has proclaimed his innocence. There is no eyewitness, no confession, and no direct evidence. It's a prosecution built on circumstantial evidence, which prosecutors believe is compelling, including DNA found at the scene of the murder on a knife sheath. Now both sides are battling in the courtroom as the countdown to this 2025 trial continues. Now, a lot of things are sealed in this case. There's a gag order. There's limited access to some of the courtroom proceedings. But when he was first arrested, there was the affidavit, the arrest affidavit that provided a lot of information. Did it provide all the information? I'm not sure. But it provided a lot of information. So I want to go through some key parts of this because I think they're really significant in what we are investigating tonight. We begin with a review of footage from multiple videos obtained from the King Road neighborhood showed multiple sightings of suspect vehicle 1 starting at 3:29 a.m. and ending at 4:20 a.m. After reviewing the numerous observations of suspect vehicle 1, the forensic examiner initially believed that suspect vehicle 1 was a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. Upon further review, he indicated it could also be a 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra, right? So your first big piece of evidence in this case was, as we knew, were these videos, surveillance videos of this white Elantra. And that became, we're looking for the owner, the driver of this white Elantra. Then we read this on November 29th of 2022, At approximately 12:28 a.m., Washington State University police officer Daniel Tiengo queried white Elantras registered at Washington State University. Now, WSU is just a few miles away. It's across the state line, but it's close to Moscow, Idaho. As a result of that query, he located a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania license plate, LFZ 8649. The vehicle was registered to the accused killer, okay? So when I heard that, to me it was like, okay, so this is how they figured it all out, right? They figured it out because of this officer decides to take a look at what's happening in his university where he's an officer, Washington State University. Now, more from the affidavit. Law enforcement obtained search warrants to determine cellular devices that utilize cellular towers in close proximity to the King Road residence on November 13th, 2022, between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. This is the time of the quadruple murder. After determining that the suspect was associated to both the 2015 white Elantra and the 8458 phone, investigators reviewed these search warrant returns. A query of the 8458 phone in these returns did not show the 8458 phone utilizing cell tower resources in close proximity to the King Road residence between 3 and 5. There were no hits between 3 and 5. Based on my training, individuals can either leave their cellular telephone at a different location before committing a crime or turn their cellular telephone off prior to going to a location to commit a crime. So they didn't get the hits of his phone there, but the explanation is, well, maybe he turned it off. So this brings me to the next question in my investigation, which is an important one. And I think we've really got to zero in on it. How did they identify their suspect? How did they land on him? What was the piece of information that led them to him? Or did they put information together to get him? How exactly did they do it? Do we have a clear idea of that? Joining us, Chris McDonough, the interview room with Chris McDonough, and retired FBI special agent and expert in criminal investigations, Bobby Chacon. Great to see you both. Now, I want to read a couple of excerpts from a Slate article entitled "How Police Actually Cracked the Idaho Killings Case." According to a law enforcement source familiar with the investigation with whom I spoke,